School committee will begin in approximately 1 minute.
I'm going to call this meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council Fiscal Committee. We'll call this meeting to order. It's April 4th, 2017. Thank you to those folks who are here at the Carnegie Town Hall and for those of you watching us on various media outlets at this time. I will ask for a motion to approve the minutes. We actually have minutes from December 6th. You'll recall that we had two just sort of informal work sessions between then and now. So the minutes we're approving are from December 6, 2016. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you. Those are approved. We then will look at, the conversation we've been in, just to again recap, is that we're looking at the youth prevention services line item in the budget. It's currently held through a contract, not even an agreement, an informal agreement between Prairie View Prevention Services. I see the Jensens are here today, and the Sioux Falls School District, and then there's also relationships with the private schools here in town, some of them, and then the city provides the funding for that. And so we've kind of been looking at, the original idea was to cut them in half, and there were members of the city council that didn't approve of that, and so we did amend the 2017 budget so that it's back to what it was previously, but we're examining why and where that money goes, and so we just going to recap very briefly. Mr. Bixler, I noticed if you'd come up, the consent agenda tonight, it's the 7 o'clock meeting tonight, has a consent agenda item that goes to Prairie View Prevention Services. It's $95,000 something. Can you talk about what that is and how that fits into the grand scheme?
David Bixler, budget analyst. The amount tonight on the consent agenda is for $95,000, and that is for the Sioux Falls School District and the services that are provided by Prairie View Prevention through the Sioux Falls School District. And then also that it's not on the consent agenda because it didn't meet the threshold is $8,000, and that is for Prairie View Prevention for the non-public schools. And those contracts are both through the end of June.
So we do have a signed contract for the Sioux Falls School District, the public schools, correct? Do we have signed contracts for the private schools?
We do.
For this? Okay.
There's contracts, both contracts are signed.
Okay. Okay. Questions from the committee for Mr. Bixler? Okay. All right. Thank you. Then at the second work session, we talked about the idea that we feel like the school district maybe needs to be a little more involved in that, and so we kind of volunteered Councilor Erickson to be involved in that conversation. So I'll let you kind of give us the recap on that.
Thank you. And this has been quite the complex issue, far more than I had anticipated. And so I did reach out to the Sioux Falls School District. I did exchange numerous messages with school board member Todd Tolke, and we talked a little bit as well. And then he had referred me to Dr. Maher. And so Dr. Maher and I had a lengthy conversation about what this looks like in their school. I certainly don't want to misspeak or I guess say too much, but the conversation was good, and the intent of the conversation is as we move forward, what does it look like? What are their needs? My concern is we as city folks say this is what we see, and them say, oh gosh, that doesn't work for us. And so the conversation really geared towards possible needs, the impact that it would have for them. They have verbally told us that they would continue to give us access to students as well as space as needed, and continue to work with providers to do that. The other thing that they had stated as we talked about the benefits to the city as well as the school district and the families, really, and what that looks like. And, you know, we've heard a lot about truancy in the schools, and there's a new law that's going to be shaping and taking place here, coming into effect. And so certainly as we offer these services, it helps keep the kids in school. It helps with the truancy issues. It helps making sure that there's not those distractions when kids get in trouble on the weekends or during school even, or what that might be. They are committed to being a part of the conversation, and they are committed to providing any feedback that they see. They certainly want to see it strengthened and making sure that we continue those conversations working together. So that was kind of the gist of our, conversations between both the school board as well as Dr. Maher, and so they're willing to have either Celeste or Jamie Nold continue to be a part of that, and anyone else that wants to be a part of that discussion. But that's kind of how they do things from their end. Recently as well, we started having, if I may,
Yes,
Madam Chair, we started having some conversations too with the county and what it looks like from a county's perspective and what's being done, what measurables are being done, and those are just kind of shaping and taking place. Really, as something that was stated that keeps playing in my mind was that the idea of this being in the police budget, really if the police are involved, it's too late. We want to catch them before it gets to the police, and the police should really be used to divert and refer versus, beating down doors to get somebody that's selling drugs. I mean, we're past the issue then at that point. And so, what does the target age look like? What does the prevention look like? And what can we do based on research and data? I think those are still questions that we're still continuing to work through with collaboration of the county. I think that those conversations can continue as we bring them together. I don't know if I gave you enough information or if there's more that anybody would like to add. I know we've all had conversations with others as we wade through this.
Good, thank you. I appreciate you spending the amount of time that you did with Dr. Maher and with the school board representatives. I think we're at a point that we need to kind of have some open discussion in this session. Just kind of, we have individually brainstormed little things here and there, but we don't really have a solid strategy to move forward. Yes, we have the budget line item for all of 2017 is there. But the contract only goes through the end of June. And so that's kind of where we're at, is that I guess I'll just toss it out there if there are things that each of you want to share in terms of ideas or where we're headed. Otherwise, I am going to just toss out a couple ideas then. The one thing that has kind of bubbled to the top of the conversation is to think about sort of an RFP process. Is there a way to go after, do we want to, especially after hearing, not only the budget address last year, but now this new State of the City address this spring? Prevention is a huge need in this community, not just for youth, but for youth in particular, but particularly for drugs and alcohol, yes, but drugs and alcohol. And this particular grant doesn't necessarily do that, doesn't necessarily cover all of the needs. And so I think that's part of the conversation that has come up, so I'll just toss that out there. And then just kind of ask for, again, we need to do some real serious thinking about how are we going to make this go forward. Are we going to just sign off and say, yep, keep it going the way it is in 2017, or are we going to truly make a difference and change the way this works?
I will say the mayor made a fantastic case for our group with his slide on crime and prevention and how much crime is increasing with drug-on-drug activity, whether it's a drug deal gone bad and people are bringing guns and somebody gets shot or stabbed or whatever. But we're hearing so much about drug-on-drug crime and the impact it has on the community. And I mean, there was a whole slide on the state of the city, and I think that spoke volumes for prevention and making a change in something. I don't know if it's an RFP. I don't know if there's other communities that do this. There are other communities that have already created processes that have expectations and clear, solid measurables of what we are getting for our dollars. So I don't want to certainly monopolize the conversation here, but I know that it's been done. I think that we certainly need to look at strengthening it. If it's an RFP, if it's collaborating with the county to see what is going to happen. I know they've made a lot of changes with 2 Senate bills, 70 and 73, with adult activity, crime activity, and how that is handled, as well as now the juvenile justice system reform and what that looks like. And so how can we partner with them to fulfill the need that they're addressing as well? As we heard the Thrive presentation a couple weeks ago, there's this web of services everywhere, and people are doing the same thing. I'm not saying that's happening right now, but we need to rein it in. The other thing that we have to be mindful of is in the state of the city, it's very clear that sales tax is not growing as projected. We do not have the available funds that we've had in years past, and so we need to be really conservative at whatever impact we're doing. We need to have clear measurables of what we are receiving for the dollars.
Right. So if I can just then highlight, you've said exactly the notes that I've taken, Councilor Erickson. There are two issues involved with this. That when we initially, as a council, said no, don't cut that, we're going to restore it, we didn't really think about this next step. And what we've learned over the last several months of study is, one, the idea that our tax income is declining. You know, it is still growing, but it's not coming in at the rate that we thought it was going to. And number two, we're really struggling to prove the ROI on the money that we are spending. We don't know exactly where it's going and what's happening with it. I mean, we get lots of reports from Prairie View Prevention, but we are struggling as a city to prove what the benefit is to a city tax dollar, to a city taxpayer. And so that is the struggle there.
Because the focus has not been drugs. It's been more alcohol-based.
Right.
And drugs is where we're seeing the issues.
Right. So other input from, yes, Councilor Rolfing.
Yeah, in looking at this over the last, whatever it is, 3-4 months that we've been doing this a while, it seems to me that the word prevention should be one of the key things that we look at, not treatment, but prevention. Once we got into the treatment part of it, it seems to be kind of taking care of itself to a certain extent. But it's like any other problem. Let's go to the root, which is trying to prevent kids from becoming using drugs and alcohol, or at least modifying it a bit so that they're not going to be addicts for the rest of their lives and be a burden on society. So that's kind of where I'm coming down on this thing is let's focus with this money on prevention as much as we can, and I think in the long run that's going to do us more good than if we look at treatment. Right, and to clarify, that is what the line item is used for. It is strictly prevention. It is alcohol prevention for the most part. Well, no, it's treatment too, because they're assessing. They get the kids, if I'm not mistaken, you get some kids in from high school who have been picked up by the cops, and now they're going and they kind of slap them on the wrist and they take them there and then they do some maybe some education and some that kind of thing. But if we can get them even before that and do that kind of education, I know that there's all kinds of studies, I'm sure, on whether DARE works or whether that program or some other program, but there's probably something around the country that is working and showing significant decreases in drug and alcohol usage because of prevention. I keep harping back to, you know, my kids were told, go home and tell your mom and dad this is what smoking's doing to them, and what a dramatic effect that had on the smoking rate in the United States. Same thing with the use of seatbelts. And I never used seatbelts until kids came along. And then we kind of wondered whether we needed it for them, because, you know, we could always stop them doing this, right? Like our parents did. No. We finally learned that we need to put them in seatbelts, not only seatbelts, but car seats, and better make sure the car seat's in there right, and this kind of thing. Education, education, education.
Okay, good point. Other comments, Councilor Starr?
Yes, I think one of the things that Prairie View did a great program last week over at O'Gorman, where they had brought in Sheriff Milstead, a DEA agent, our nurse educator from fire rescue, as well as someone who's been successful in maybe kicking the meth habit. And the one thing that I picked up more than anything out of the entire program was meth is being made by the tons, not just ounces and grams anymore. I mean, mega factories that are being set up along the borders that are producing 1,000+ pounds of meth every month. If we don't go from the demand side and lower the demand, we'll never be able to seize enough drugs off of the street to turn this issue around. And so it's got to be from the prevention side. It's got to be us talking to our kids, providing those opportunities so that they don't start, and they don't start with their friends, because that's where it is. It's not a mean, evil drug dealer somewhere. It's our friends and our acquaintances when our inhibitions are lowered with a little bit of alcohol or other things. So it starts in our community as a community-based situation. So as we move forward, I think we're at that point where we need to leverage our funds to get the best bang for the buck. And the hardest part of serving as part of this committee is trying to decide where that best bang for the buck is, and so that we're responsible to our taxpayers, that we can make a difference in our community. And it's definitely from the prevention side, but it's saying exactly what we're looking for and trying to put our finger on that, and that has not been easy. And the entire issue is that way. I know the mayor pointed that out in his State of the City address. He challenged us. If we had a solution, he'd put it in place tomorrow. And I think that's why this issue is so complicated, because there's so many directions to approach it from.
Right. Other comments from the committee?
The other possibility, I will just say, is I know that the three of us have been serving on a collaborative government type task force-ish thing. I don't know if that's the right word. This would be a great opportunity for us to take an issue, and not saying that it's not in this committee, but that would be, you know, a topic to bring up. You know, as we talk to the county and say, hey, what are you already doing? Because they do a lot already as well, and how can we partner together with some of that? I don't know if that's an option or an opportunity that we could potentially see, but I know that we've been looking to identify and moving forward so we can keep the ball rolling with this, identify what our plan is, identify those actionable items, and move. And if, you know, Councilor Starr, as we do it as well, since we're part of this committee, joins in at that point too.
Yeah. Remind me to bring that up tomorrow morning at our meeting.
Yeah, that is kind of it's not really an official group, but it is a group that has had some influence on the various governing bodies. So
Relationships, building
Yes.
relationships with
That's-
some of the other groups.
Cooperation, collaboration.
Right. Okay. How would the committee like to move forward at this point? We want to just let it sit, let it ride the way it is?
Well, I'll make a suggestion then, and that is that we continue doing what we're doing right now until we can either come up with a better or different type of plan. Either, you know, I think some of the prevention that Prairie View is doing is good, and that kind of fits, but I can see maybe another direction for this maybe in 2018.
Okay. Other thoughts? I'm going to open this up to public input because I do have, or public commentary, because I do have a couple questions for Mrs. Jensen. Please, Darcy, if you'd come up. Particularly, can you outline for us, you know, we've talked a lot about alcohol prevention, and one of the best charts you have shown us is that dramatic decrease over time of alcohol consumption among minors, among young people, and the resulting, you know, benefits of that sort of education. What my question is then is that we're hearing all this about massive meth coming to Sioux Falls. How much of what you do is involved with both drugs and alcohol, or is it all focused on alcohol? Can you just remind us how that pie works in your world? How much of it is drugs, alcohol, or both?
It's actually both. And the funding we get from the state, so our portion of budget that we get from the state is alcohol specific. The funding that we get from the city, we focus with the drug issues on. So we do focus on both. That gives us the opportunity to look at both. When we have kids come into our programming, or we do classroom education, when we do our prevention education groups, we actually focus on both, because what we want to do is build a foundation with the parent and the child, looking at decision making, looking at facts about drugs, about alcohol, and building the skill set they need to address the issue if they're approached to use. I think it was a comment made at the town hall meeting that it won't be some strange person that offers you the meth. It will be somebody you know and maybe someone you trust. So our purpose in our prevention education is both, to do drugs and alcohol. We are an evidence-based program as regulated by the state. You do not get funding unless you are an evidence-based program. So when you look at what do other cities do, what do other communities do, if they're funded through our state, if it's a South Dakota community, they have to have been on the evidence-based list of prevention programming. Without that, there aren't outcomes. We do have to meet those outcomes and goals as we move forward with our funding, and have in the past.
Good. Questions from the committee? Mrs. Jensen? Okay.
It would be good for us to continue to work with county, prairie prevention, the school system, administration, et cetera, so that when budget time comes around, we do have some answers for 2018.
Right. And you've heard us over and over again talking through that, especially that really prickly part of how many Sioux Falls taxpayers don't have kids in the Sioux Falls school system. And so that continues to come back to us, that's going to bite us in the butt if we don't really take care of that in the right way. And so I think you're right, Councilor Rolfing, that we have to kind of figure out what 2018 is going to look like. But there may be some other things that'll maybe kind of bubble up out of this collaboration that may change how we look at this as well. Okay, thank you. You have been down a long road with us as well. I appreciate your patience and your grace as we go through this. We'll continue to have these conversations. This group, I don't know if we'll kind of see if maybe a resolution comes out of this, but for now we're just gonna ride it, I think, and just see how it goes.
Well, I do appreciate all of you taking so much time. I know you entered a world that you aren't familiar with drugs and alcohol, and understanding what that means, what a screening means, what an assessment means. How do you do prevention? I know you've all taken time out of your busy lives to do that, and I appreciate that and commend you for being willing to do that. Being a city council that takes this serious and looks at the future of their youth and their community and says, we want to do something. That's remarkable to have that. Not all places have that support in place, and I would certainly welcome being a part of looking at how does the city move forward, putting something in place that's institutionalized, so it's not something that comes up year after year. Do we need this? Do we not need this? But looking at the city as a whole and saying, what are the things we can do to ensure that our youth will have that prevention, ensure that they're making good decisions, and change those graphs so that we see people reduce the use across all drugs.
Right, and I just kind of piggyback off that. I think that's part of the reason we're talking so heavily about talking with the county is that let's break down those school district boundaries so that we don't have to worry about that so much. Let's start dealing with the problem as a whole. Let's do it holistically rather than just in that Sioux Falls boundary, you know. So lots of things to come yet. So appreciate your work with it as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the audience? Yeah, come on up. Remind us of your name.
Brett Cruz. I told you how to probably fix the problem last time, and then Rex told me how they're doing it. I was like, what? Like killing kids? I don't know. I don't understand. But yeah, just make sure the kids, if they do get in trouble, I'm just saying, like they have to know primary boundaries or whatever. You know, are they gonna get in trouble? Or their parents? You know, I don't know. I heard some good things here tonight, so that I was like, oh, you guys didn't move on a little bit, you know. All right, yeah, that's about it.
Good, thank you. Points well taken. It's a community effort, sir. Absolutely, thank you. And thanks for being at our meetings as well.
Can I say one more?
Certainly, one more and then we're gonna adjourn.
That's fine. Darcy's surveys, you know, but I did them in school, and about like they were like a joke to most of the kids. So I'm just saying, like maybe half of it's true out of the survey.
Surveys, yes, there's
Yeah.
always a margin for error, right? Good,
Yeah.
thank you, point well taken. Anything else from the committee? We're gonna keep moving forward on this, folks. And with that, I'm gonna adjourn this meeting. Thank you.